Welcome to NeLI Pod, the official podcast of the National eDiscovery Leadership Institute. Here, we bridge the gap between technology and the law, bringing you the forefront of electronic discovery. Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, your co-host and navigator through the evolving landscape of eDiscovery. With over 20 years at the junction of law and technology, I'm excited to help bring together leading experts and practitioners who provide a wealth of knowledge on electronically stored information.
And my name is Brandon Mack. I'm the co-host of our podcast. And with 2 decades of eDiscovery experience myself, I'm also thrilled to be able to participate in bringing you information and education around the world of eDiscovery.
NeLI is not just about discussions. It's about education and it's about collaboration.
Our guests, from judges to eDiscovery professionals, share insights that cater to all experience levels.
Whether you're looking for a broad overview or in-depth technical analysis, this podcast is your gateway to understanding and implementing effective eDiscovery practices.
It's important to note that while we engage with some of the brightest minds in the field, the opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the individual guests and the host, and do not necessarily represent the views of their respective employers.
We're here because of our passion for eDiscovery and our commitment to providing free, accessible educational content to legal professionals everywhere. And welcome back to another episode of NeLI Pod, the official podcast of NeLI. And today we are thrilled to be joined by Todd Itami, the Director of Artificial Intelligence and eDiscovery Solutions at the Covington Law Firm. Todd is also an attorney, and he's also a recognized leader in artificial intelligence. He brings a wealth of experience advising clients on some of the most complex legal challenges in the industry today. We should, of course, mention as well that Covington Law Firm is a platinum sponsor of the NeLI conference, and we are so excited for Todd's and the firm's support of NeLI. In this conversation, we're going to dive into AI, the evolving role of technology in the legal practice, and the trends that we're seeing today. Todd, welcome to the show. It is so great to have you here. It's so great to see you again.
Thanks, Daniel. Great to talk to you and Brandon today.
So let's start off with just a softball here. As the Director of Artificial Intelligence and eDiscovery Solutions at Covington, elaborate on what your primary responsibilities, what your role really looks like there.
Yeah. So, kind of like half my time is spent doing your normal eDiscovery lawyer stuff. Whether that's on big giant CIDs, big giant products cases, or smaller cases, Hatch-Waxman Act litigation, teams of 5 or 6 lawyers. So it's kind of your normal, what everybody else is doing at law firms in terms of eDiscovery. But the other half is really focusing on the integration of, legal tech more broadly. And of course, the AI gets all the attention today, and it is awesome. And I'm a big nerd for all of it, but it's kind of looking at solutions broadly. What things can we do to deliver new value to clients with the tools, whether that's automation or integrating the new technologies in ways to save money, or better yet, kind of deliver new value, kind of get more insights on the data than we've had before, do new and cool things. And so it's just trying to be the glue and operate in this kind of intersectional space between maybe software engineers, developers, analysts, and lawyers. And so it's really kind of operating in that space where that's where I have fun.
You mentioned integration, and you talked about a number of different things, those functions that you just discussed, that you're integrating all of those and introducing those to attorneys at the firm. For large firms like Covington, how crucial do you think this role is? And do you see the industry moving in a direction where every big law firm is starting to have a position that's at least similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. The question of how long will it take law firms to adopt these technologies and react to these is, we could talk for a long time about that and reasons why it might be faster or slower than past adoption of technologies. Because in some ways, the practice of law has not changed since 1870 in a lot of ways in the way lawyers do business. And yes, we, have some refinements around document databases and the word processor. We've decided to integrate that one now, but, this is going to be a big shift. And, kind of this industrial revolution of the AI era, the question is okay, how fast are firms going to react to that? And I think everybody has to react. I think everybody is going to need to change the way we do business eventually, change the way we leverage these tools. I think we'll staff things differently. People kind of look at it and AI and these technologies as just efficiency amplifiers. But yes, yeah, it's going to do that. But the other stuff is the stuff that's really interesting. The new value that it's bringing, the way it's going to let us interact with the law, and the role of the lawyer is going to be very different. And so I think, will big firms have to? Yeah, they're going to have to do something, whether they move affirmatively and whether they need to be kind of first movers or in front of the wave, or they can do the classic, like, well, let's just wait and see what our competitors are doing and then kind of like follow suit. I don't know which one of those it's going to look like exactly. I tend to think it's going to be the first one more than the latter. But yeah, I'm not sure people will have a choice. I'm not sure firms will have a choice eventually.
Todd, that's interesting you say that. Would you say that, though, we've been here before, though? I mean, how you have presented it, it's like we're at an inflection point in the industry for law firms, for corporate legal departments, pressure from legal departments to the law firms to get going, get with it, roll out. What does your AI roadmap look like? But would you say that perhaps we've been through this hype cycle before, as Gartner puts it, going through the various different stages, the hype cycle being that, look at all you said it, look at all the efficiencies that AI can do for you. And everyone takes a look at it and says, yeah, but I don't know it. I don't trust it. I don't believe in it. And I'm just happy, making photocopies and billing for my time for reading things manually on paper, et cetera, or just doing keyword searches. Do you think that is going to happen as well? Or this is like deja vu from 10 years ago?
I think this time is different. I don't know, in a lot of ways. And so I guess the question is, okay, why? Well, why do you think this time is different? And all of a sudden software is cool. Lawyers are paying attention to this. Lawyers know they need to learn something. And there seems to be an energy around it that's past, or at least kind of extending the hype cycle curve, if you will, that it seems to have momentum. It seems like we're going to have to do this. And the truth is that, like, it is just such a valuable tool. Even if, you're a lawyer and you're using vanilla X model, to do your day-to-day. I've yet to meet somebody that really gives it a chance, really digs in with the tools and tries to use them, and then after 10 or 20 hours says, yeah, never mind. I'm going to wait for it to progress a little bit more. Like, it's just so valuable. It does so much that I think it's going to be hard to resist this one.
Yeah, I don't want to keep hammering on the same point over and over with you. But you said something else that was really interesting in your description earlier. That we tend to look at technology as accelerators and enhancing things that we already do. But what you see in this industrial revolution of what AI is bringing to the table is the opportunity for new functions, things that we've never been able to do before, or never been able to do in these particular ways before. If you had to say, here are the top 3 things that I think are differentiators in what AI will enable us to do versus just accelerating our operations, but what would those be? The low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking in the eDiscovery context, or?
I asked it in the eDiscovery context, but if something else is more interesting, fire away.
No, I think kind of there's the law writ large and how the technologies will play into the practice of law as a whole is one thing. The eDiscovery function, or this place that we're in here, talking about that. So I think there are a couple things here. Well, one, the end of the rainbow, I think, looks very different than now. Right now we engage in very elaborate processes to capture data in a forensically sound fashion, filter it, then go give it to lawyers and they read it through it, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you think about that, the point of collection, system files and all, that amount of data compared to what actually gets produced in the case, it would blow my mind if it's 1%, because you do some initial NIST, you get away the system data all out of the way. That takes out a big portion of it. Then you run these search terms. That usually cuts it down another 80%. And then the lawyers review it and decide what's relevant, what's not relevant. And then you produce these documents. And then what the reality is, in any case, only a handful of those documents make it into trial, right? Only a handful of those documents are in any way important enough for somebody to look at a trial. And then how many of those are actually outcome determinative? It's nuts. If you told me 1% of what we collected at time one is important enough to get the trial, I'd be shocked. Like, what kind of case is this? Maybe in, very low discovery, very few documents, or criminal cases or something like that, But when we're talking kind of like large scale corporate, big law firm stuff, it's wildly inefficient, the process. And so it's kind of like, yeah, that is gone. I think we're moving to a place where we're going to see enterprise platforms have on them. We're going to first get over this indexing problem that we have now. That's essentially the issue that we have and why we go collect all these documents, right? Because the data is sitting in place and we don't have good ways to search it. We don't have good ways to search it where it's going to search attachments or text that is not recognized as, extracted text. We don't have good ways to go and look at it in place. And so that's why we do these big forensic collections and run them through eDiscovery tools. So we produce things that are right. Well, what happens when indexing improves? And we're already seeing this. We're already seeing a lot of attention, with AI. All of a sudden, there's attention on indexing because people realize, wow, if we could just get this data into the LLM, let's go do that. And we're seeing really cool stuff. We're seeing, softwares tokenizing and creating really elaborate indices that allow the LLM to interact with it. Well, for eDiscovery purposes, that's the whole game. And so I think at some point, the enterprise platforms themselves, we're going to be able to have a conversation with them. And we're going to say, here's what the case is about. What's relevant? Look at everything. That's the end game. And, that will trickle down to the rules of procedure. That will trickle down to a whole new way of doing eDiscovery, because we don't need to go through the elaborate song and dance of mass collections. And even if that happens on a shorter scale, even if that happens not quite that extreme, it's still going to really radically change the way we look at eDiscovery and change the whole complex of the industry. Daniel, go ahead.
Todd, you said so much just now that I want to unpack a little bit of it. We have a very diverse group that listens to the NeLI Pod podcast that has various different levels of expertise. You happen to have a background in computer science. You have a leg up on a lot of what we're talking about. Obviously, come equipped with a lot of knowledge and experience. You said some words in there just now that I think would be helpful to just back up and expand upon. Okay, so you mentioned the word indices, right? Or document indexing, right? Document indexing is actually a form of AI that dates way back many decades ago. And you also talked about tokenization. So for those that are listening that just eyes glossed over, don't really understand it, it's critical to understand the concepts that you're talking about here to really get a better handle and a better understanding of it. So can you back into some of those concepts for us and why that's important for us to know?
Totally, yeah. So for the people who haven't switched episodes yet, so, it's indexing. So we have files sitting on a computer, and you could imagine telling a computer to go search through them and tell us, hey, go, I'm looking for a document about cats. And so then it will go and read through everyone. And physically, you could imagine doing that in a linear fashion would take a long time. So, we have these things, indexes or reverse indexes, whatever you want to call them. And literally, the oldest and simplest form of this technology, like it would exist in a document review database, looks much like a book. Every document that has the word cat, it lists it there. So instead of having to go search through 10 million documents for the word cat, you go to the index, go to the C, cat, okay, that's in documents 1, 2005, and 1 million, and then it returns those values. And so just imagine that, but getting even more complicated, creating, rather than it being a simple book index in the back, think of things that are more elaborate phrases or concepts. You call them tokens, you can call them vectors, whatever you want. But the idea is you're creating that book index, but in a much more elaborate fashion and in a way that's more aware of its context. And so the processes now are not only creating the book index so the LLM can simply find it, but it's also extracting these more complex forms of indexing, and that's what it's feeding to the LLM. That's what it's feeding into it. It's much more efficient because the LLM itself also doesn't have to go through a process of converting the text And so the idea is once we're able to convert or look at all the data on a computer, once we have this elaborate index built, well, then we just have to look at it and we don't have to go through these processes. Because you can imagine now if there's data on somebody's computer and it's in a zip file, that zip file is attached to an email and that email is attached to an email. And on the zip file, there's a PDF, and on the PDF, there's a photo, and the photo has text on it that's important to the case. Currently the technology doesn't exist to like run a search for that text and it's going to show up, but that could be very important. So now we have to like grab the files, bring them into an eDiscovery tool, expand everything, run OCR, and go through these steps. But if we had better tools, it would be possible to go in and index the container and look at, do the OCR and do these things that, it just so happens that LLMs are really good at some of these functions, LLMs and deep neural networks at things like OCR. It's great. And so that's really the idea, is building a better book index, but kind of an elaborate and very fast one.
I think we just saw a live demonstration of the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Part of your role when you talk about demystifying or explaining or integrating for attorneys who aren't necessarily steeped in technology, introducing them to this technology and helping them along the way of educating. What's your advice? Well, what's your approach to it? And what's your advice to others who have similar roles on how to do that? Because I think what we just saw was a great explanation of some concepts that to you might be very basic, but to, like Daniel said, to some of our listeners are relatively new. So how do you handle that within the firm?
Yeah. So, within the firm or within an organization, we have a lot of focus on training, finding the best training tool to match your culture, requiring training, setting up that expectation and making sure everybody knows the limitations of the current tools they're using. While I think the alarm around LLMs in the sense of information security and confidentiality was like sounded way too loudly, I do really believe in understanding technology, just like we should for a search engine. Just like you're not going to go pound some confidential information into the search engine and say, can you translate this for me? Like, yeah, don't do that with your client's data. Be very careful with it, just like we have to be careful with all these other tools. So it's that educational curve, but kind of like on a personal level, if my friends ask me, what should I do? I'd like to encourage people that, it's this tech is accessible. Tech, it's accessible. It doesn't care who you are or where you came from or any of these things. And it's part of why I love it. I grew up in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. And my parents, we didn't have a lot of money, but they had this idea that like computers are the future, and so they bought 486 DX 33 megahertz computer for me when I was in I think kindergarten or first grade. And that was awesome. It was a way of kind of connecting me to the world, and I could do things and program things and talk to other people and operate kind of on this covering new ground. And it kind of like felt like I'm kind of on the map. Like I get to be part of the larger world and doing cool things. And that's how tech is. It's accessible. And sometimes I think, you can listen to enough like eDiscovery or read enough eDiscovery articles and you'd be like, wow, it's kind of like, there's like this clique. They're like people who are in the know. And I'm just like, that's so not how it goes. This is the most accessible thing for everybody. And I encourage people to dig in, like go learn it. I think it's a pretty good idea right now. If you're a lawyer to like, okay, go spend some time. There's great crash courses out there by some very famous professors and data scientists that you can do with AI that are like 4 hours or 5 hours. Those are all worth it. It's worth it to go even deeper. And, the conversations I have with my clients about their models in cases, everybody just assumes you can read Python. Everybody just assumes you understand the basic architectures of these LLMs and prompt flows and how that interacts with cloud computing. And I don't think every lawyer has to operate on that level, but I would encourage lawyers to like, okay, take the technology seriously and approach it with some humility, and really dig in. It's worth it. It's a no regrets proposition to like go take one of these courses, go take the Andrew Ng crash course or go take a Python crash course and learn these things. That's like a no regrets time investment. Yeah, especially with the coming wave of technology. So that's kind of my macro micro advice I give, at least.
It makes me wonder, Todd, I want to dig in, to use your words, into your background a little bit more since you said it, and go off course a little bit.
Sure.
You have this amazing background of the computers were in your hands before you could probably do anything else. And for those unfamiliar, 486 is a very old computer, but back then that 486 was like, wow, what a processor. It could turn through data, etc. Right?
Yeah.
It reminds me, in 1989, our family had an Apple IIe. And in order for anything to work, you actually had to program something, and you actually had to learn a programming language, or it just had a blinking cursor. You could do nothing. So how does somebody like you, Todd, who's got this computer science background, end up in law school of all places?
Yeah, I asked myself that a bunch of times. I don't know. I did college, and I started a business. Just doing. It started with web design, web applications, and then it kind of expanded to any sort of B2B software or custom kind of software solutions for small, medium-sized businesses. And I did that, and I just got to a point where I sold both of the ventures that were taking up all my time. And I was like, I like school, and I always wanted to be a lawyer. So when I went to law school, I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to be wordsmithing briefs for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to be showing up in court and talking to people, and I'm done with these computers. Like that's the old Todd. I'm going to go be a lawyer. And so that lasted for like, I don't know, 2 years after I graduated, and then hey, we have this discovery database over here. I'm like, oh, what's the architecture? Like, okay, yeah, like actually do know about that. And then I was like, okay, never mind. Let's just embrace it. So kind of just right place at the right time, looking for something interesting. Look at all my friends, like, we're going to law school. And I'm like, okay, took the LSAT, got a good score. I was like, all right, I guess I'll go to law school. It's not the best, not the most well thought out plan there, Daniel, but
I love it though. It's honest, and I love it. I love it, Todd.
So, on that topic, talking about your career, I know that you recently had a moving back to Covington after being at Covington for a while and moving over to Gilbert and now back to Covington. I would think that a move like that is kind of searching for the right fit in the firm that you're in, but also the right outlook for what your role is going to be in the firm and how it's going to play out in the firm. In your experience, what are you seeing as far as the differences in how different firms are approaching not just the use of technology and AI, but the staffing of professionals who deal with it?
Yeah. It's really interesting to see who's using it the most, how it's being integrated. My friends at a couple of my friends who are plaintiffs lawyers, good old fashioned plaintiffs lawyers who handle these big claims, like, wow, they are really deeply using the technology. They're very interested in it. Then they're kind of like operating on the right out on the edge of how much value it will deliver to them. And it's very impressive to see the ways they're doing those things. And it's kind of different than, a big law firm and the things how hard it is to kind of steer that ship. And I don't know, for me personally, I can see both worlds. I could see people who want to go to a smaller place and it's more nimble, or perhaps, their clients, all their clients are very tech forward and they want to do these things. But it's also great that, the great variety of clients that I get to see on a monthly basis. Major tech companies get to kind of go behind the veil, see what they're working on, advise on various issues. And that kind of like buffet of being able to look at everybody's stuff and, see the way they're thinking about it and spend time, hey, with the ML engineer, you have a few minutes just to chat, or whatever. I learn a lot and I love it. And I kind of like have this whole universe of things to look at. And it's, being in a law firm, everybody wants to show you their products, or everybody wants to talk to you about technology. And that's nice too. Whereas if you're at, a vendor or a smaller place like that, that might not be the case. Your competitors might not want to tell you what they're using. And so I get to kind of be spoiled to look at a bunch of things. And I really like that.
I love that you've got this perspective that is very optimistic about where we're going with AI, with generative AI in particular. And you were referencing LLMs. For those that don't know, that's called large language models. That's how generative AI engines are developed. There's also SLMs, small language models as well. Todd, I'm sure you can go in depth into each of those, but you have a very optimistic outlook. And it makes me wonder if and it's also measured against some of the news that we've been reading about, and Brandon and I talked about it on another one of the NeLI Pod podcast shows with another guest, is that there seems to be a very measured approach that's coming out of this, but you are very optimistic, and I really like that. And I'm wondering if you feel, based on some of the things you were saying before about the massive amount of data that's out there, and that it just makes sense. This idea that you talked about just asking the Gen AI about the data and it pulling up just what you need. Do you think that we are really on the cusp of getting there, where it is just going to be a part of what we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think the end game of eDiscovery proper is just, okay, the software does a lot of it, and it's like, I don't know, people don't want to. There's a lot of reasons why the predictions in the legal market are different. There's a lot of voices and people who the industry will change. The industry will be transformed, and it will look different. And there's a lot of people who've invested a lot of money in the current industry, right? And so some of that is that pushback I see is kind of like, okay, whether it's important that we get it right, I don't know. But I guess the question is kind of like, really? Is it? What do you think's going to happen? And I'm kind of like, yeah, really. I do. What's stopping it? There were probably there are 3 or 4 products, startups this year at Web Summit that I'm just like, wow, this is totally focused on indexing, totally focused on, and they're coming at it from a place of, hey, we'll let you know what's in your files, business, and you don't have all this rot, or dark data that you can't see or you didn't know is there sitting around, and now you can access it. But it's really like, wow, that's one stone throw away from being an eDiscovery tool and solving the problem. But I don't know. I think that the kind of the large context features of Gen AI and eDiscovery are really going to demand that people use it sooner than later. We think about it just like a tar replacement. Like, this is going to be like better tar or faster tar, and that's fine. But it's in some ways that's kind of the most predictable use case. Great, like you don't want to be somebody wants to like go put that before the court, be person number one, be my guest. But in the meantime, there's a lot of other stuff that it's going to do, and maybe cooler stuff than just determine relevancy and make yes/no choices on kind of sending documents in and out the door. And that kind of new value, things it's doing that are different, that seems more interesting to me than like, we have a better tar here. Like, yeah, the better tar is awesome. I'm all for it. There are some issues. It'll be interesting to see how they play out using that. But yeah, it's the other stuff, the new value, the things that it's going to do that we would never imagine possible, that I think you're not going to be able to resist it. You're not going to be able to get away from that. Some lawyer is going to be doing that. And if you don't do it, then they're going to go to that lawyer because it's going to be cheaper and better.
I have kind of a two-pronged question based on some of the things you said there. One, it seems like right now in the market, for a number of the different applications that we're seeing for generative AI, specifically the reviewer replacement or the new tar version, that it's a bit cost prohibitive for a lot of clients. What do you see changing that, and how quickly do you see that changing so that it can accelerate adoption?
Right now, some of those, and I try to be product agnostic as I can, but I will say that, yeah, there's the pricing, the premium for a tool that is legal, quote unquote, is quite a bit right now. But I think that it's difficult for me to see how legal tech secret sauce can outpace vanilla models on some level. And, when lawyers are very obsessed with tools, of legal tools, which tool, and see this and that. And I like them as much as anybody else. I mean, give me a break. I'm like a computer nerd, I'll try anything, but it's on some level, okay, the people matter more. But the question is like, okay, it's hard for me to see how your kind of AI secret sauce is going to outpace so much the LLMs that are changing. We see these different companies kind of trading blows on functionality, on performance, and especially if the last 2 or 3 months haven't showed you everything, it's like, wow, okay, things are still improving. There's kind of a hype out there that we hit a wall because this one way of training like wasn't paying off and we scaled it more. But I think we're kind of okay, guys. That's like one dimension of it. There's still a whole bunch of different ways that we can make this better. And so it's hard for me to see how a particular application or a particular thing is going to be so much better when these other models are kind of everybody's leapfrogging each other. And so it's not bad. I mean, if you have some review platform and you're feeding into it like vanilla API with X good model, you can get some pretty valuable results out of that. If you sit and spend a little time with it, wow, you can do some pretty cool stuff that you couldn't do before. And so I think that, and we have seen this from a few companies just saying, okay, yeah, we just have a pipeline. You pick your model, it's a pipeline, and we have X, Y, and Z kind of grounding or RAG techniques behind it. And I think that's going to lower the prices down quite a bit. And also, by the way, the prices are very different. If you go and choose the exact state of the art bleeding edge compared to something that was bleeding edge last year, it's like 98% difference in some case. You know what I mean? The prices are falling, and especially if you can kind of think about these tasks in ways that you could stack models, because you don't always need the Cadillac for everything you're doing. Maybe you can send one of the smaller models through, and those are like pennies on the dollar. So I think the market will come around eventually. Maybe not. Maybe folks will be able to have the legal versions of these things. They'll be able to charge whatever it is now, 10 or 20x of how much it actually costs. But to run the data through the LLM. But I don't know. I think the market will come around eventually. We're just at a place now where it's, as much as everybody's talking about this stuff, it's just moving very slowly in the eDiscovery context. Actual people using it, implementation is not moving as fast as, the pundits like myself with like light up computers in the background would have you believe.
Well, speaking of those light up computers in the background, before we got started, we were talking about some of the work that you do personally. And you've got a lot of experience in sort of bespoke solutions that are built around machine learning and AI. What do you see as the balance going forward of that sort of value being brought by particular firms or particular organizations where I'm going to custom build you something versus I'm just going to tie you in to that public massive LLM that everybody knows about, and we're going to go that way?
Right now, I think it's somewhere in the middle. There are some things that you can do. The big hyperscalers have very powerful platforms that make it very easy to set up a prompt flow that actually make it really easy to kind of do a DIY RAG model. And that's something that, like, I don't know, the other day I set one up in a coffee shop while I was waiting for somebody on my phone, and so it's really simple now. And a lot of these the software packages and modules that the hyperscalers have available make it really easy to do your own development work, let alone bringing it down. Even me writing my own model in Python, okay, NVIDIA kind of figured out everything with CUDA, and I just call it, and it does all the hard programming, talking to the GPU. And so really, it's easy to do DIY, but sometimes the devil's in the details for what you're trying to do. And I think that there is a place and a role for DIY, especially when you want to keep the data very contained and, using a model that you can keep in your own system. You can execute it yourself, and the data never leaves your firewall. There's a role for that. But generally speaking, I kind of think like, okay, but are we going to outpace the wrapper? I'm kind of, people talk about the wrapper of these LLMs like in a derogatory fashion, but I'm like, oh no, I want somebody who's doing the wrapper work for me, that then I can go give it to 2,000 lawyers. That's different than Todd has a particular problem that he wants to solve on a particular case and save the client a bunch of money. Okay, well, that's different. You can kind of operate in the micro there. But when you're talking about, let's give this to all the lawyers, then I'm like, okay, are we really going to be able to develop a UI that's better than, whoever else is out there with their UI? Probably not. And so it just depends on who the user base is, and what you're looking to accomplish. But I avoid hey, this is our secret sauce, this is our LLM. Like, it really? Okay, like maybe there actually are better than these models at doing legal work. I don't know. But it's kind of hard to see. I haven't seen very many examples of anything that comes close. But
so a lot of what you're talking about, if I were to summarize it, it's crawl, walk, run, right? It is, don't go head deep. Don't start developing all the software. You need to have a vision. You need to have, what is the end game in mind, is what I'm guessing. And so, Todd, if you were to give advice, whether it's to a legal department or it's to a law firm, as to what an AI roadmap should look like in your mind, what is that? What does that look like? And obviously there's a lot of, as you said, a lot of, devil's in the details, but how could anyone just start and say, okay, you're right, Todd, listen to you, you're 100% right. We need a roadmap. What does that look like?
There's this whole school of thought by a professor named Von Hippel that users are going to, and this is far precedes, AI, that users are going to be able to develop better functions or better use cases for any technology than designers, than architects, than people who are sitting around like me saying like, I know how this is going to work. And so I think that getting the tools in the hands of the lawyers and getting them immersed in the technology, that's the number one thing you can do. Start using it. And every practice is different. People's workflows are different. And so both on an individual level, on a practice level, what sort of legal work you're doing, I really think that any associate sitting using an LLM all day long in a transactional practice that I know nothing about, or maybe even a litigation practice where I don't operate frequently, is going to be better at coming up with what are the good use cases here than I will. And so for me, the step one, and it's a huge step, is get some sort of tools in the hands of lawyers and develop a use case registry. Put it in the hands of everybody you can and have a registry where we all come together and talk about it together. What are you using this for? And I think, that will create synergies within the firm saying like, how do you use it? And we'll be able to, then you'll really be able to see where it will deliver value for your particular firm or your particular organization. So I think, step one is get something in their hands and then have everybody put in a central place what they're doing, have somebody in place to go look at those use cases and curate them or summarize them or something. But that's, I think, the first step. And in some ways I'm like, yeah, take that first step and there'll be more, you'll see from there, what it's giving you. And you'll kind of have an idea, wow, do we want to kind of create our own, in-house prompt flow for this? Or do we want to take a body of work that perhaps we've done that we'd want to have the AI just reference that? You're going to see all these different places where it's valuable to you, and the light bulb is going to click on with X body of regulatory work or X code that we always think about, or, whatever database or knowledge management systems, the light bulb will turn on for everybody. So that's kind of like my one step, like get your feet wet, go put it in the hands of users and then start listening to them. That will help at your company. Of course, training, of course, letting having the infrastructure, realizing like, hey, this is going to cost money at first. It will improve our efficiency, almost guaranteed. Does seem like another no regrets kind of decision. But, I think my roadmap, that would be stop number one for any organization.
Todd, I feel like we could go on with this conversation for another 3 hours pretty easily, but we'd be remiss if we didn't bring it back to why we're all here together on this podcast, which is NeLI. And so I know that you are, a strong advocate of NeLI, as is Covington. And I'd like you to talk to our listeners just a bit about what it is out of all the landscape of different eDiscovery organizations that are out there. What piques your interest about NeLI, and why have you lent your support to the organization?
NeLI it's small enough to where everybody's at arm's length. You're talking to people. The conference is great. Everybody's in a room. They talk to each other. It's very friendly. It's very accessible. It's a great place to go and hear some really amazing ideas. All the speakers at the conference this year were awesome. Way more worth your time listening to than Todd Itami, but it was very cool. And we have federal judges, leaders in this industry talking about these ideas, and it's in a room and people are raising their hand and asking questions, and it's a conversation, and that's very helpful to me. I'm at some of these other conferences or things, like I am just like totally saturated with marketing. I'm totally saturated with all the deck that everybody uses for X. And so I really like it when things get a little bit more in depth or more conversational. It seems a lot more valuable to somebody like me. But we also, had a bunch of law students there this year who I was talking to a few of them afterwards, like, this is great. I learned a lot. I'm really interested in this now. People would just like stop by to check it out and then stayed for the whole conference. So that was pretty cool too.
Todd, attorney, director of AI eDiscovery Solutions at the Covington Law Firm. Man, it is always fun to talk with you. You have an energy, you have a passion for this, and it comes out loud and clear. And I hope that your energy and passion gets tossed on to every single person that ends up listening to the podcast.
Great.
Thanks so much for having us.
Well, I had so much fun. Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed our discussion and want to learn more, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite streaming platform. We're here to help you stay on top of the latest trends and developments in eDiscovery.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about today's topic. Reach out to us via our social media channels or email us directly. Your feedback makes our program stronger and more attuned to the topics you care about in the world of legal technology.
Remember, all the resources and insights shared today are aimed at enhancing your practice and understanding of eDiscovery.
Join us next time on NeLI Pod as we continue to bring you expert knowledge and lively discussions. Until then, keep innovating, keep discovering, and keep pushing the boundaries of legal technology. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.